All right. And welcome to Hobbies with Robbie. Today we have most excellent guest, Jack Shaefer. Jack is joining us from, where are you joining us from, Jack?
Boulder, Colorado.
Where it is not snowy right now, but it will soon be snowy again. And Jack is a practitioner of Chinese medicine and a Daoist priest. And today he is going to perhaps talk a little bit about those things, but we're mainly going to talk about hobbies, which is what this show is all about. Hi, Jack. Please introduce yourself a little bit.
I think you pretty much said it all. There's not a lot interesting to say. That might be the end of the show.
Okay, right, guys, so the show is over. Go away, and now me and Jack are just going to have a private conversation here.
Yeah, I mean, like you just said, I'm professionally, I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner here in Colorado, and part-time teacher. I do a little bit of teaching here and there for it, although I don't particularly like to do it professionally for a lot of reasons. But that's the gist of my professional life. My non-professional life includes the study of Taoism and teaching Taoism with my Taoist brothers, Josh Painter and Ross Rosen, which I know you had Josh on this show several days ago or something, and we run a nonprofit called Parting Clouds Daoist Education, where we work with students all over the world. Right now we've got students in France and Canada, Mexico, the Dominican Republic, Australia. It's a pretty cool gig. But those are, that's kind of the public face of Jack Shaefer,
That's awesome. And I really like the public face of Jack Shaefer, but today we are going behind the curtains, people. So I have to admit a little bit of ignorance on my part. We have talked quite a lot in the past, but I do not know that much about your personal world. But there is one thing I know, which is that you are a pretty serious martial artist.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how you define serious. It's been a part of my life for a long time, So when I was like, before kindergarten, so when I was like 5 years old, I lived a few doors down in this apartment complex from this karate teacher. And I used to walk down to his apartment all the time and throw this ball at the door until he'd come out and hang out and talk with me. And I'd always see his like uniform and his belt and stuff in his apartment. And I always wanted to that was the initiation of like, what is this cool thing? And I'd see his friends come over and they would be doing their thing in the field and whatnot. But he didn't teach kids. He had no interest in teaching children. So my parents ended up sticking me in a judo class. So I started doing judo as a little kid. And then when I got a little bit older, I refound that guy and I studied karate with him and a couple of other different karate teachers until my 20s. And then, kind of went back and forth in and out of judo during that time. And, when I was in college, I had this karate teacher who was super influential on me. He was actually a big reason I got interested in Chinese medicine in the first place. He had introduced me to this fellow from Taiwan whose family were lineage holders in this particular kung fu system, and they invited me to come to Taiwan and live with their family and learn their martial arts and their medicine. And I was like, this is the thing. This sounds awesome. I can do this. So then I found out I couldn't get licensed in the United States with a foreign apprenticeship. So I decided I should go to school. So I finished college and did Chinese medicine school and ended up reconnecting with that guy later. But I've been, long story short, dancing with different martial arts, my entire life. I have a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and but my main love is really like Chinese martial arts, for better or worse.
So you're gonna then that is really cool. But I do have one question because
Yeah.
you kind of flirted with the audience here for a second. Did you spend that time in Taiwan?
No, no, because I knew that if I was going to do this, I needed to be able to make a living when I came back. And
Right
so,
on.
yeah, I decided I would get my education in the States so everything would be legit. And then I could go to China as much as I wanted to. And so after I graduated Chinese medicine school, I went to China and I
To
stayed
the
there.
mothership, to the mainland, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't end up going to Taiwan. I ended up deciding to go to mainland China because I had more connections that way, through my teachers in school. And I stayed there. I went with like most people do with like a group of other students. But when they all came back, I stayed, and
Yeah,
I
that's
just
how you
paid.
got to do it.
Yeah, I stayed. I paid tuition at the college and lived in the dorm, and I stayed there until I went down and did the thing that a lot of expats do, where you get your visa renewed by the guy at the police station for some money across the table, and so that was kind of like my first like foyer actually in China was that time, but it through that, it really, I realized I had to go back more. So, for the last 20 odd years, I've gone almost 20 times. So,
Yeah, this is us China weirdos. We got to keep going back for more. Some
yeah.
there's a few people that have just stayed there, and in the future, I'm hoping I can have one or two of them on the show. But where were you mainly located?
That first time I was in Nanjing.
Nanjing. Oh, that's a nice place. It's a very old and beautiful and historied city. But I believe that you have also spent time up north and in the south. Is that right?
Yeah. So, most of those like trips that I've gone for the last several years have been to Beijing. So from like the first probably, I don't know, several years of the 20 aughts, I was going to Beijing. And part of that was, I had a really good friend who introduced me to this particular Bagua teacher, and I got really tight with his lineage. And I would go there and spend time with him and his lineage holder. And then there were a couple docs that I would try and go meet, and I was trying to get to know as many people as I could on those trips. But in the last several years, with through Parting Clouds, Josh Painter and we've been spending most of our time in Sichuan and Zhejiang. You know.
Well, Sichuan is where the good food and the attractive people are, so I'd say that's not that bad. But I
I like
understand that
Sichuan. It's awesome.
I have never been there, but I plan to go this fall. But I understand that you Bagua, the martial art of Bagua is probably your big favorite martial art. Is that right?
Um, I don't know. I mean, it's the one I spend the most time on, probably because it's the most complicated. You know, and but I did Xingyi for quite a while, a Taiwanese branch of Xingyi, and but man, I don't know, something about Bagua I just keep falling back in love with over and over again.
Well,
There's
it's in my humble opinion, the martial arts in Beijing and Tianjin are excellent.
yeah,
So
it's
if
good stuff.
and you have one of the most famous Bagua teachers in the world. Not that that's either here or there, but definitely you are from a very solid background. Do you want to introduce to our viewers a little bit about what the heck Bagua is all about? Because a lot of the people watching this have probably never heard of it.
And I'm still trying to figure that out. Actually, it's hard to explain. You know, I'll just tell it to you the way it comes across to me. So, when I first met um Schaefer and He Jianbao, so this system is Yin style Bagua through Mun Bao Zhen's lineage via Schaefer and He Jianbao. And you know, a couple things happened for me. Like, I'd been doing martial arts a long time. I'd had a lot of, competition sparring, and also, my fair share of non-competition sparring. And those two guys, even Shea, who at the time was close to 80, you know, I was amazed at how sneaky they were and how hard, especially, He Jianbao's big, but Shea was really little, and I was amazed how hard he could hit me, you know. And so we, the thing that I think was really interesting was the um, large doctrine of strategies contained within Bagua. So it was kind of like you could find an avenue that worked for your body and your temperament and your duifang, your opponent, that you could almost always apply, and I thought that brought a lot of freedom to it in a way that, but still with a certain amount of structure that, it's a lot of martial arts, right? It's like, oh, we're going to go no structure, like MMA or, like Jeet Kune Do or something. But then it's really, it's not that interesting and it all gets really repetitive. Or you could go crazy structure and then it doesn't really work, like really formalized wushu and some of those other things. But this was all about particular strategies and how you can make your body move, and how if somebody responds in a certain way, how you can respond and then build off their response. And that was the thing about Bagua that was really interesting to me. And it kind of, I liked that was how it was from its inception, that was how, Dong Huaichan, the founder of it, taught.
Yeah, well, I mean, this offers an interesting perspective and question about Bagua, because I think when people think about Chinese martial arts styles, a lot of the time they think about using fists. But Bagua, it is, in Chinese, it's called Bagua Zhang. Zhang means like a palm. Now, but is it right to say that Bagua, it can actually be applied to using fist strikes too? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, in our system, every single animal has some version of fist, of palm, of stabbing. I mean, really, it's more like just in different ways to use the limb. So, yeah.
And I think, is it also fair to say that Bagua has really absorbed a lot of different ideas from many different martial arts in China over time?
I mean, it looks that way to me. I'm definitely not that kind of practitioner where I can, I don't look like, I have friends who they look at stuff and they're like, oh, that's Wuzu trend and that's this and that's, and I don't really look at things that way. But I think that there's only so many ways to move the body. And I think that people found some really efficient things to do. I do think Bagua I think a lot of 21st century Bagua stinks. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that probably couldn't actually apply anything, to anybody who's not completely complicit in letting them do it.
There's a lot of sexy Bagua dancing out there, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Now,
sort of,
I
for
have
sure.
I have more questions. I have so many questions for you
Dig in.
because you're an interesting guy. So, you have been fascinated with Taoism for a very, very long time. And I'm going to treat this as fair because you said it's not your profession.
Yeah.
Tell me about how you came to be interested in Taoism.
Honestly, Robbie, like my life has been pretty eclectic. I lived in a pretty rural area as a kid, and um, I grew up like riding BMX bikes and racing motorcycles and running around with a bunch of kids skateboarding, thinking we were like the little Alva crew, and like but I've always been fascinated with doing something, always doing something, whether it was skating or bikes or motorcycles or snowboarding. I just like to be busy. I didn't really, we had two TV channels where I lived, so it's not like you could sit around, and there's only so many games on an Atari, but fortunately my dad, he when I was a kid, like 14ish, started introducing me to Buddhist meditation. It was something that had been flirting with since he was, he was a hippie age. kind of guy. And so I started learning some of that, and one of my martial arts teachers started teaching a lot of that stuff to us. And so I'm not really the kind of person who likes to do something for the sake of doing it. I really like to understand why I'm doing it. So that was why I was interested in learning language, because I don't like translators. I want to be able to try and understand for myself, you know. And if I'm going to sit and do meditation, I want to understand what's in it for me, and why do I do it, and how does it work. And so I started learning, you know, just reading more about Chinese philosophy. And my sister gave me this Tao Te Ching when I was like 15 years old or something, and I got fascinated with the fact that this was somehow related to meditation. And then just little by little, it kind of came and went and ebbed and flowed through my life. And I think when I was in my 20s was really when it started to kind of make sense that there's a lot to this, you know.
There is a lot to it, but you know what? I think that you've given me some other interesting things to ask about. But I do want to come back to Taoism, because I think that this is a topic which more people should actually be aware of. But first, let's talk about your childhood. That's my Austrian psychotherapist voice. So I have some questions, because you said that you were a little Elva crew skateboarder, and I was also a skateboarder, but I think it was a little bit later than you. And I figured that the people that we identified with were actually a lot of people from those old crews, like Rodney Mullen
Mhm.
and Steve Caballero. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your career as a skateboarder and a BMX bike rider? But let's start with skateboarding, because I'm very partial to that particular hobby.
Yeah, you know, I don't even remember how my friends and I ended up doing it. We just started doing it. And where we lived, you know, there was really no vert. We tried to make this ramp out in the desert, and it lasted for a little while, but you know, somebody came along and burned it at some point, you know. And so, you know, the town was pretty poor, so there were a couple of empty pools. So we'd go try and clean those out and skate in them. But for the most part, it was street. And I don't know how we got into it, but we got into it. And it was part utilitarian, part style. You know, it was just, you know, we were into all the skate rock, and you know, the early punk. And you know, it was so that my friends and I, like, there were all these factions in skating, right? There were sort of the Bones Brigade kind of kids, and they were like the kind of kids who were riding like Santa Cruz boards. And then there was the sort of almost like gangsters who were riding like Alva stuff. And that was who we were kind of into, you know.
I know about Steve Alva. You guys were the bad kids.
I mean, we were who we were. I don't know if I would consider myself a bad kid, but you know, some of those dudes, you know, there was some of those dudes. We went very different ways eventually. But yeah, it was, you know, skating was fun. I had a great time with it. I would never say I got super good at it. I liked street. You know, it really led to snowboarding for me. You know, it was when I got my first snowboard, which was a Burton backyard. That changed a lot. And so I had a Burton backyard, and then I ended up with one of those Burton Cruiser. I don't know if you've seen those before. It's the one with the fin in the bottom.
Oh
And
yeah, I
so
know a little bit about those.
yeah, and so
When
we used
you
to.
talk about snowboarding, you're speaking my language, because I don't suck at snowboarding. I suck at skateboarding, but I don't suck at snowboarding.
Yeah, and so that was the deal, right? Like, you know, I could get away with things on a snowboard that that I couldn't get away with on a skateboard, because skating, you just get hurt so much more. But I lived really close to the mountains, and so, you know, we'd pile into a car, and back then you couldn't go to the ski resorts, which was okay because we didn't have any money anyway. But where I lived, there was an old ski resort that was closed, and this road that snaked up behind it. And so we'd just take turns, like driving up and dumping each other off, and then we'd come down through the trees, and then the other guy would drive us all up, and that's how we all started snowboarding. You
Well,
know?
that sounds like the real snowboarding.
It
You
was
know,
fun.
when I was a kid, snowboarding had just become acceptable, and so I feel like a lot of those things that you guys went through as young snowboarders and skateboarders, you paved the way for those of us who came a little bit later on. So you know, we're all very thankful to you for punk rocking out, as it were. Now, but you've kept snowboarding, right? Is that something you still do?
Yeah, I mean, haven't done it, this year. I didn't go this year, and some years I go more than others. Depends on how things are going, what I have time for. I'm pretty busy, family and whatnot, or if I'm nursing injuries or not. But I
Yeah.
like it because even as a full-grown adult, you can still snowboard, and you can just do fast groomers and carve, and or you can go hit the park, or so there's a lot of, it's like you get to do street, or you get to do just cruisers. There's a lot of fun ways to do it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and so for me personally, I have terrible depth perception. And so I'm going to be on those groomers, but I'm not going to be in the park. I can do a couple of jumps, but forget going and being serious in the park. The groomers are good enough for me. So when we get together and we go snowboarding, it's definitely going to be riding down hills together. And I'll watch
Yeah, I
you.
don't mind that. I like the
any
groomers. Yeah.
Awesome, man. So now, aside from those groovy hobbies, what else do you do? What are your hobbies these days?
These days, well, I have a family. That's a
Family
large part of it.
is definitely a hobby sometimes, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, but besides work, Parting Clouds takes up a lot of time. I spend a lot of time just in that realm, reading and studying and working with our students and whatnot. Outside of those, I've gotten really into barebow archery in the last
What's
year.
barebow archery?
It's like recurve target shooting with no sights. So
Oh,
I do
okay.
that.
So it's like a traditional bow.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do that a lot with my son, and so sometimes you see those like Olympic style where they have all the crap hanging from their bow so they can be perfect. And bare bow is just like you and the bow. And so I've gotten really into that. When I was like, I don't know, shortly out of college, I did some Japanese archery with this guy here in Colorado, this old Japanese dude he's dead now. But that I kind of fell in love with that. I thought that was really fun. There's a real meditation to trying to find that stillness to have an accurate arrow. And it reminded me a lot of when, in high school I did Iaido, which is like Japanese sword. It reminded me a lot of that stillness. And it was cool. It's cool to kind of keep it up even in using modern equipment and whatnot.
So when you take your son out to do archery with you, does he like it too?
Yeah, he's really into it. He's pretty good. We usually, he's talking a little bit about wanting to compete. So we'll see. We'll see if he really,
Wow.
yeah,
You
we'll
see,
see.
this is one of the great things about hobbies, that they also have a lineal aspect to them sometimes. If
Yeah.
the kid is amenable, and they don't just reject their old man or their old, you don't call your wife, you don't call your mother your old lady, because that would make you your wife. I don't quite understand how language works a lot of the time, but it's great, because just like in your situation, you can take your son out shooting arrows, and he likes it and he's good at it, and he's considering getting serious about it. So I mean, that's congratulations to you, Dad.
Yeah, we'll see. He's talking about it. We'll see where it actually goes.
That's
You
some
know?
talented dadding. So now, you really are passionate about Taoism, right? Because this is something that I hear you sort of coming back to again and again. And I would like to mention that you teach a fairly large and fairly diverse cohort of people who are either aspiring toward entering into an authentic Taoist tradition, or people who at least are very, very interested in understanding what Taoism is all about. And I'd like to ask you, as a person who's doing this, obviously largely out of your own pure love for it, how is it for you as a teacher of this discipline? How do you, because a lot of the people who study with you, to contextualize it with our show topic here, a lot of the people who are studying it are coming to it probably first from the perspective of an interesting hobby, and then maybe becoming more serious. How do you view all of this and contextualize it?
Yeah, man, that's an interesting question, Robbie, because we talk, Josh Painter and Ross Rose and I talk about this kind of thing a lot. The the way we never sought out to start teaching in the first place. Parting Clouds was like founded on a conversation that Josh and I had walking through the mountains in Sichuan, and just this like, the knowing and the understanding that there was a need for real authentic Taoist education in the West, because there's a lot of there's some good teachers who don't teach much. There's some good marketers. But it's just in the West, it's a real, as it's just a real challenge. And so we, it all started with us just wanting to help other people be able to access this, realistic, authentic teaching. And so, at first it was, I think, kind of a challenge because like our personalities, the three of us are pretty serious and pretty driven when it comes to getting this thing right, and I have this memory. We have this teacher in Zhejiang, and we were there with several people, and it was the first time we had met him, but there was a few people with us that had met him before. And he said, he's like, they couldn't do anything he had taught them previously. And then he said, well, this is what we're going to do. And somebody asked a really dumb question, and he just got up and left. He just got up from the table and he was like, I'm done. And, and so, we realized, like for Josh and I, like, we really wanted to learn that particular topic. It had to do with Fuzhou medicine, using talismans and incantations. And so him and I, we just took off and went in the temple and found a table and sat down to start practicing. And, that's not something everybody can or is willing to do. And so we realized, like, nowadays, like, not every student is willing to work as hard as maybe you are, And so I think trying to meet people where they're at, give them the tools and the resources, but let them kind of sow their own field is sort of where we're at right now. And I find it incredibly rewarding sometimes and incredibly frustrating sometimes. Because,
well, everybody has their own individual destiny. But just a question about when the teacher got up and left. Was it one of the people in your group that made him get up and leave?
It wasn't. No, it wasn't. It wasn't one of us. But
it
was. We were all together. Like we were there traveling with a friend and a couple of his students, and so it was kind of like we were there, sort of sharing the opportunity.
I bet that when you started to practice very seriously, that the teacher, if he noticed it, probably was quite happy, at least inside.
Yeah. So what happened was, is his like main disciple noticed that, what the two of us were doing. We had this big pile of scrap paper, and then we were practicing and studying it and memorizing what he told us to memorize. And then he came out and looked at what we were doing and checked our work, and basically was like, you two can be my students. And that was kind of the beginning of that relationship with him. And that's really unfolded into a pretty amazing lineage that we're both, that we're lineage holders in, and a really amazing amount of teaching from him.
Well, that's super. I feel like in a certain way, I'm kind of tempted to nerd out here for a minute, because most of the viewers won't know very much about Taoism, besides maybe the little bit that they've been exposed to in sort of our North American Taoist philosophical genre. But one of the interesting historical things about Taoism is that it branches off into a few different approaches. And so this thing that you were talking about, writing talismans, and then also the other school of Taoism that you have a lot of interaction with, which is the very authentic, I guess they're both Longmen schools, right? But the talismanic Taoism, it has a history which both intersects and bifurcates with the Dragon Gate school, which is what you're part of. So would you mind touching on that a little bit?
Yeah, the talismans thing is that's a topic we could get into for hours, but this particular teacher's lineage you know, it while it is Longmen, Dragon Gate, you know, it's obvious got, when you look at the talismans, got influence from something called Lushan and another lineage called Maoshan. You can see them where the talismans look really similar and the incantations have some of the same words and whatnot. But it's this fascinating way of delivering, I guess you could say, I hate the word healing, but you could say a way of delivering healing to somebody, whether it's physical illness or sort of emotional or spiritual illness, without, you know, without the use of something that's obviously medicine, because it's a medicine that's kind of conjured up between you, the practitioner, and they, the receiver or the patient, and then with an interaction via the celestial realm in some way, whether it's the various immortals or deities or whatnot. You know, it's really it's amazing, and it's there aren't a lot of people who are doing it in the United States that I've seen. I don't know about Canada. There's some people who claim they do it, but when you look at it, it doesn't really look right. You know, it looks like
Our
there's
Canadian Taoism scene is pretty small.
Yeah, I know there's some cats in Toronto that supposedly do it, but you know, they're those guys from Hong Kong or something, but I don't know
I think they're
much about
called the
there.
Tin Hat Taoists. It was me that said it, don't worry. Anyway, so I think that this this talismanic stuff is really interesting. But you know, there's an old saying that there's two types of people. One type of person is like a fox, and so they have lots of tricks and they know a lot of different things. And the other type of person is like a hedgehog. They just know one big thing. And I'm definitely a hedgehog. And so that means that I'm totally ignorant about things like talismanic Taoism because I've never really looked into it. And so I'm very interested to ask you a couple of more questions. I've always noticed that there's some peripheral relationship with herbs that you guys have that is connected to your Taoist teacher. And does that fit in with the talismanic medicine somewhere, or how's that work?
What do you mean?
Well, I remember seeing, like Josh, for instance, mentioning that your teacher had suggested like one of a plant containing berberine as a medicine to take.
Oh yeah, that's a different lineage.
Oh, it's a different lineage. Is
Yeah,
it
that's a
Taoist
different
or
guy. He's part of the
APTM?
Huaishuan lineage.
Oh, that's interesting. So
Yeah,
what's
so
that all?
he's in Hubei, you know. We're
Oh,
still decoding a lot of his lineage, I got to be honest with you. You know, he's somebody we haven't spent as much time with him as the other guy in Zhejiang. I mean, the guy in you know, he's near Wuhan, the one you're talking about, and he does talismans and whatnot, but his style is a little different. You know, the guy in Zhejiang, his approach to it would be like, write the herbal formula that you think is correct, and then here's a talisman you can burn into the herbs to make it work better. So you
oh, that's
burn it,
neat.
put the ashes in the herbs, and then you have them take it. You
I
know.
hope you guys are using some delicious paper.
Yeah, I mean, most of it's like mulberry paper, like dyed with turmeric. So
Oh, okay, well, that's not bad at all. And for people
no,
who don't know, mulberry also makes some very, very delicious berries. Thus the
yeah.
name, mulberry. They're a little on the sour side for me, but they're quite famous in China. It's a very multi-use tree. But isn't it true that the mulberry tree also has a certain significance inside of Taoist texts?
Yeah, I mean, you see it. It's definitely not something I know a lot about personally. You know,
I think it might be in the Tao Te Ching.
probably.
Anyway, going away from that noble subject. So
Yeah, so the guy you're talking about, that guy actually he's a Chinese medicine practitioner, does acupuncture and herbs and whatnot, and that's where the berberine thing came from.
oh, I see. So it's like, have you ever heard the phrase, out of every 10 Taoists, there's 9 doctors?
Yeah. No, I haven't, but it's not surprising.
Yeah, it's an interesting phrase. So, but you have been doing Chinese medicine for ages, but it's not your hobby, so we're not going to talk about it very much. But I do have a couple of questions about China stuff that you've done in general. So we know that the reason why you went to China, a lot of it is because you were really fascinated with it. And you definitely have a connection with martial arts, which you've had for a long time, and you have a connection with Taoism that you've had for a long time. But what, in terms of what keeps you going back to China, there must be also another layer to it. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like a perpetual student as a person, and so I'm never really quite satisfied with my knowledge level on any particular topic. It's actually a crazy place to be, my mind, when it comes to that. And so if there's the things that, many of the things, not all of them, but many of them that I'm quite passionate about, the sources for them tend to be there. That said, I don't do, after Xie died, the I don't spend as much time hunting down martial arts in China as I used to. And that's largely because many of the people, I haven't been really that impressed in quite a while. I haven't spent much time doing acupuncture there in quite a while either, because I spent a little time with a guy named Wang Dai in Beijing, who he was really, that guy was really cool and had some neat skills, and I learned some really neat things from him and from Xie. I haven't met an acupuncturist there that I thought was really worthwhile, other than just hurting people. And so, I think the reasons I keep going have to do with finding people who know more than me. And in these last, 6 or whatever years, it's pretty been strict Taoism. I haven't done any Chinese medicine over there, or martial arts for that matter.
Well, I think that you must have found your calling. And the good thing is that Taoism is really, really, really deep, because it is largely caught up in every element of all of the personal dimensions of a person's life. So you guys have to know a lot of stuff, and you have to learn a lot of stuff over time, because you're looking at yourself in a very, very holistic way. Now, this, I think, brings up a question, because a lot of people might always equate hobbies with fun, but things that we're really into often also can be things that we have to be a little bit, what's the right word exactly that I'm looking for? We have to be regimented about the things that we love sometimes. And I know that your approach to studying Taoism at times is very, very regimented. Do you want to share a little bit about what you do every day?
Yeah, I mean, on a daily basis, what my life looks like. I get up. I usually do anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour of qigong or meditation, depending on the day, and then I spend some time at my altar, my Taoist altar, and I'm chanting scriptures, and then I get my son ready for school and take him to school, go to the office and see patients. And then during my lunch break is usually when I train. And so I lay out a calendar of what I'm working on and what I'm training, and then I train that. Usually is almost always it's midday, so I'll practice for most of my lunch hours. I'm like a lazy acupuncturist, so I work from like 9 to 11:30, and then I work from 2 to 6:30. So I have that big long break in the middle of the day where I work out, and so that's when I'll practice martial arts. And then then I come home and I'll do hang out with my family and do some evening chanting, and then oftentimes meditation, sometimes not. Sometimes I work out again, depending on the day of the week. So that's the majority of my like Monday through Friday. On weekends I go mountain biking or do archery or go snowboarding or whatever, depending on the weather.
Well, it sounds like a pretty nice way to live. What does your son think of having a dad who is a priest and a martial artist?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't. You'd have to ask him. It's he's into it. He's decided his little patron deity is Sun Wukong.
Oh,
So
yeah, of course it is.
which I mean, it's good for kids, right? Sun
You want
Wukong
to
is
tell us a
perfect.
bit about who Sun Wukong is and why your
Yeah,
son might choose him?
the Monkey King. You know, Sun Wukong is the Monkey King. So he likes him because he's, you know, precocious and has a staff.
Yeah, he's a pretty cheeky guy, that's
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
Well, you just make sure that your son doesn't get locked up in stone for like 5,000 years,
yeah,
because
right.
that's what happened to Sun Wukong for being too precocious.
Yeah. But
Um,
that's, you know, I mean, he doesn't know any different. He's funny. Like he, I give him talismans for different things, and he asks for them for things, or he asks for Chinese medicine for different things. He hates acupuncture, but he'll take the herbs, or he likes all the sort of magic treatments. Like if you've got a nosebleed, you know, how you can hold different points on somebody's hand to stop it. And he likes that kind of stuff, you know. But you know, we'd have to bring him on camera, let him tell you what he thinks.
well, maybe we'll do that sometime. It sounds like you guys have a great relationship, though.
Yeah, it's good.
That's
He's at a
awesome.
great age.
How old is he?
11.
It is a great age. You just keep him on that track, and he will grow up to be awesome like his dad.
Yeah, he's into martial arts too, you know, but his interest in martial arts is right now more play oriented, you know, and I don't really push him. I don't teach him. You know, I don't necessarily believe in it. And when he gets older, if it's something if he really wants to learn from me, then, but you know, right now he practices, you know, a kind of a karate style with a teacher in town, and you know, probably when COVID's all over, he'll start doing jujitsu. But
That's great. I think there's a saying, or at least there's a belief among Chinese martial artists that the father shouldn't teach the child directly.
yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, it can get messy. Well, I think that this has all been incredibly interesting, and I'm very, very glad that you decided to come on and talk to me about this. Is there anything else that you didn't get to mention that you'd like to mention?
No, not really. I think you asked, you know it all now. My life is not that interesting at the moment.
Well, no, I'll tell you some things that I found out about you today. One of which is that you guys were little miniaturized Steve Elva gang. And that's really exciting because I'll be honest with you, when I was a kid, I wasn't very fast or very good at jumping over fences, but my friends were. And so they were probably the miniaturized Steve Elva gang, and I could always smell when things were going south. So I remember one day that my friends discovered a construction site in a park where they had left the keys in the bulldozer, and they got in, and it turns out that they were able to turn it on. And so knowing that my little fat porcine body wasn't going to make it out of there when the cops showed up, I just went home. And on the Monday after school, my mom was like, "So you guys were hanging out over there. What happened in the newspaper with and as it turns out, they had actually run over a porta potty with the bulldozer. So I totally identify with your patronage to Steve Elva there. I think our deities were a little bit different back then. Another thing that I found about you is that you have done martial arts since childhood, and you are really into it and have always been really into it. And you spent a lot of time in China doing that. And on top of that, I found out that we're going to go snowboarding together, which is exceptionally cool. So, and I bet, you know what, everybody always says, "Oh, I'm not that complicated," but I bet there's like at least 10 or 15 other layers there that we haven't peeled back. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, I mean, you
Awesome.
know, I mean, life, like you live a lot of years and have a lot of interests, so I've tried a lot of things, you know. But
That is very good. And you seem to have an excellent direction, and you're making these things that have been with you for a long time also give benefit to other people, which is a beautiful and wonderful thing. And I know that from your teaching in the Taoist world, even though I've been a little bit tangential to it, I have absorbed lots and lots and lots of knowledge from you, and it has helped me a lot personally in finding direction and contextualizing myself within that community. So, Tiangazan.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's cool to hear. You know, it's mutual. It's mutual.
Well, I hope that I haven't confused you too much.
No, no, not at all. Not at all. Yeah, I
Right
like what
on.
you're doing.
Well, okay, everybody, that was Jack Shaefer, and I think I might not have introduced your family name at the start of the episode. I think I just called you Jack.
That's
So there you
okay.
go, guys. It's Jack Shaefer, which you will know from the introductory blurb under the video. Thank you very much for watching, and we will be back next week with more Hobbies with Robbie. Jack, do you mind sticking around for a sec?
Yeah.
Okay,